Today I'm gonna, even though it's a couple days behind, but I want to talk about why the red wave didn't happen and why it didn't come because of what we saw on Wednesday. Democrats outperformed history and expectations with a surprisingly strong midterm election performance on Tuesday, with the promised red wave nowhere to be found. Now, now the worst news is that the GOP it appears that the GOP are the favorites to narrowly retake the House of Representatives, though the outcomes of key races have not yet been called. Now, apart from this, the results so far are a litany of disappointments for Republicans. Now, in the Senate, the contest that will determine determine control will be Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, and those three have yet to be called. Um, Now, Democrats have a path to hold on, helped by John Fetterman's victory in a GOP-held open seat contest in Pennsylvania. Now, if Democratic incumbent Senators Catherine Cortez Masto and Mark Kelly triumph in Nevada and Arizona, the party would keep its majority. Now, Cortez is currently trailing, but the outstanding male vote will likely benefit her with Kelly being ahead in Arizona. Um, and if one of them loses, Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock is headed to a runoff in December that could determine the majority. Now, the Democratic candidates also performed strongly in the contested governor's races, and they held on to their governorship in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Maine, New York, and New Mexico. It's still early. It's still too early to tell or to make any definitive conclusions about why the promised red wave didn't appear and why it didn't happen. But there are a couple of emerging trends that can help explain what happened. Now, the one broader story is that incumbents of both parties proved to be quite resilient, making this the first midterm election cycle since 2002, in which there was no wave washing out the president's party. Instead, there was turnover in House or state legislator contests. Um, um, it was often because of redistricting, and with new maps helping Republicans in the U.S. House races in New York and Florida and the positioning Democrats for gains in Michigan state legislative contests, basically. So, another broader story here is that the country remains quite polarized, with the statewide results tracking 2020's outcomes pretty closely, rather than swinging in the out party's favor as in typical midterm years. And there seems to be two likely culprits for the Republicans' relatively weak performance: the Supreme Court's decision on Dobbs vs. Jackson Women's Health Organization, the decision ending federal abortion rights, and the former squatter Donald Trump. Um, Now, technically, what happened here? Dobbs and Trump. 1 year ago, when Republicans picked up Virginia's governorship and they came surprisingly close to winning in New Jersey as well, it appeared history was repeating itself, and that voters were turning against the incumbent squatters' party. Now, overwhelmingly, this is the most common outcome in midterms. It's what happened in the past four midterm cycles: 2006, 2010, 2014, and 18. All of those years were wave years, featuring the out party making dramatic gains in Congress and winning the key state contest and pulling off surprisingly upsets. The only very dramatic developments in U.S. politics, such as the impact of the 9/11 attacks on the 2002 midterms, seem to be able to shake up this pattern. Now, why does this happen so often? Midterms may be inherently demobilizing to many of the incumbent squatter's supporters precisely because he's not on the ballot, but they feel less threatened because they know he'll still be in office no matter how the midterms turn out, and they are therefore motivated or less motivated to vote. Now, political scientists have also put forward the thermostatic public opinion model, suggesting that swing voters tend to swing against the incumbent party and thinking that the country has been moved too far either to the left or right. Now, through the first half of 2022, the polls and special election results indicated the Democrats are on track for one of these midterm bruisings, and then the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision happened. The conservative Supreme Court justice's elimination of federal abortion rights and the protections wiped out a legal status quo that had existed for over half a century, and it's a rare example of a dramatic policy shift that's clearly opposed by the incumbent president or squatter. Now, millions more Americans confronted the possibility that if they or someone in their family should need an abortion, they could be blocked from getting it by the government. A shift in national political sentiment was quickly evident in special election results. Now the decision, and the Democratic messaging and advertising heavily focused on this, and appears to have immobilized Democratic-based voters who otherwise would have turned out for the midterms, and convinced swing voters that Republicans had moved the country too far to the right. There was another dramatic difference between these midterms and past ones: the role of the former squatter Donald Trump. Now, typically, the midterms are a referendum on the party in power. Now, turning the page from their previous presidential election defeat, the out party blames the incumbents for all the nation's problems, and it urges the electorate to vote for not these guys and wins a sweeping victory. Republicans tried to follow that playbook this year, with ads overwhelmingly focused on inflation and crime. Instead, the 2022 midterms appears to have been viewed as a choice between President Joe Biden and former squatter Trump, and not a referendum on the Democrats alone. And voters in many states seem to have made the same choice that they did back in 2020, with the state's outcomes closely matching that year's results. Now, Trump exerted his influence in getting flawed candidates like Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania and Herschel Walker in Georgia and nominated in key contests this year. He also returned to the headlines in the second half of 2022 as he faced legal problems, and he continued to disparage the legitimacy of Biden's rightful victory over him, and he geared up for a repeat squadral run. The GOP also had made it unmistakably clear that it remained the party of Trump, in contrast to, say, the Virginia's governor contest, where Glenn Youngkin tried to appeal to moderate voters by presenting a new face to the Republican Party. Yet while Democrats outperformed expectations and historical norms, the election was not a landslide win for that party. Republicans still appear favored to win the House, and some swing states still appear to be quite closely divided. Now the Republican-leaning states that Trump won in 2020, like Ohio, Florida, and North Carolina, still went pathetically red, and many of Trump's preferred candidates were not overwhelmingly rejected by voters, but instead they only lost by a small margin. Now, in other words, the country remains divided between a large block of consistent Democratic voters and a large block of consistent Republican voters. Now, with only a relatively small group of swing voters who have uncertain loyalties, as Lee Drutman and Charlotte Hill recently wrote for the New York Times, what this midterms made clear is that these divisions will likely persist so long as Trump remains a major force in politics. When Trump recedes to the background of the news, as he did in the fall of 2021, when Virginians voted and the Republicans modulate their presentation, they seem to be able to win over wavering Democrats. But since he's back, Trump is highly effective at motivating infrequent GOP voters and winning the intense loyalty of that base. Then again, Trump has also alienated an even larger group of voters, including many swing ones, and the GOP suffered for that on Tuesday as the red wave they dreamed of failed to materialize. The red wave didn't, like I said, the red wave didn't happen for several different reasons. One, because the Republicans tried to overturn Roe vs. Wade. That was why they lost on that one. They also lost on inflation because they have no idea to combat it. They also lost on crime because the crimes are higher in the Republican states, and they have no policy to try to bring down inflation, which is a global issue. They have no plan to bring down gas prices, which is also a global issue, and they have no plan to bring down the crime rates or have any plan to combat it. This is why the red wave didn't happen. But if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. If you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just a little as a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.